Welcome to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. I am Tammi Mac. Hi, everybody. Good evening. So, Angelina Jolie famously adopted three children of color, one from Cambodia, one from Vietnam, and one from Ethiopia. But of course, they were not the first to do so. Adoptive parents frequently adopt children of different nationalities and ethnic backgrounds. It's great for foster children to find their forever homes and grow up in environments where they will receive love. But when it comes to Black children, there are undoubtedly things that they need to be taught, like how to care for their specific type of skin, their specific type of hair, how to deal with racism, and unfortunately, how to deal with the police. Are white parents really equipped to deal with these issues? Well, tonight, the business of being Black on the Tammi Mac Late Show are transracial adoptions. Please welcome the former national president of the National Association of Black Social Workers, Tony Oliver. Hi, Tony.
Hi, how are you?
The creator of the YouTube channel, Holding It Down, Kimberly Holden. Hi, Kimberly.
Hello, how you doing?
Transracial adoptee and advocate, Rebecca Hudson. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And adoption YouTuber and mother of 5 adopted children, Christy Gior. Hi, Christy.
Hey, Tammy.
Thank you for being here. I start with the same question every night, and I always have to say that it's the same question every night, as to prevent any offensiveness from happening with this question. It's always, I like to get it on the one. Let's start from the beginning. Why should Black people care if Black people are adopted by other races? Why? Why should Black people care? Tony?
Well, that's a really good question. And let me say that the National Association of Black Social Workers made a statement in 1972 that as an organization, we were vehemently opposed to transracial adoption. And I'll tell you, the reason for that has been misinterpreted for all the last 50 years. The reason then, which is very similar to the reason now, is that African-American families are blamed as not being adopters and not caring about children who are in foster care. And in fact, the truth is that Black families who are interested in adoption are often screened out of the process. They don't meet the standards, whatever those standards happen to be. And sometimes they're costed out of adoption because the cost can be very expensive. And I'll just give you one example. In the 80s, there was a research study that was done by the National Urban League looking at an adoption project that was recruiting Black families for Black children. At the end of that year, hundreds of families had called that number and said that they were interested in adoption. And at the end of that year, one had gotten through. So the fact of the matter is, Black families are very much interested in taking in children. We've done it since we've been here, taking in children that are not born to us. But when it becomes a formal issue and a systems issue, racism raises its ugly head, and the things that we would like to do, end up with children in our homes, become something that we are not allowed to do.
Interesting. So systemic racism is even involved in the adoption system, where Black folk can't even adopt Black folk. That's a new one on me. Rebecca, why should Black people care about other races adopting Black people?
From the adoptee perspective, because we are struggling over here. Some of us, like myself, grew up literally the only Black person in my town around me. It was so hard for me to find my identity as a Black woman, to even understand what being Black was. And when I was finally, I was judged a lot for not being Black enough. And I feel like if Black people were more educated about what's going on in the adoption industry, a lot of the stuff that Tony said is also very true, that we definitely need to take into consideration, but also the fact that you probably know a Black transracial adoptee and they probably could use your help, but they don't know that they can go to somebody. And our experiences matter just as much as any other Black person. If we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter, then Black transracial adoptees' lives matter as well. And our lives are very, nobody really talks about us. We don't get invited to the conversation. Our experiences get left out, and we're kind of over in this corner struggling to make it by ourselves without any support or help from anybody.
And you were adopted by a white family, Rebecca?
Correct, yes, at birth.
Okay, we're gonna get into that a little more in depth as the show goes on. But why should Black people care, Kimberly? Why should Black people care about transracial adoptions?
Well, I feel that more of us should try to adopt, or at least do foster care. I know a lot of us don't really know much about it, especially in Connecticut. They didn't know that you can be single and adopt, so a lot of people just don't do it, or they don't do foster care. And then also, if you see someone of a different race adopted a Black child, help them. Like, because sometimes people are afraid to come to us thinking that we're going to make fun of them, or we're going to say, why did you adopt that Black child? You can't take care of that child. You don't know how to do their hair and things like that. When actually we should be helping. And I know in certain states, you can't adopt if you're single, or like how Tony said that it's harder for Black people to adopt. But in Connecticut, they want everyone to adopt. It's just not many Black kids in Connecticut in foster care. There's a lot, but not many, because I do it a little different than Rebecca. My children aren't Black that I adopted, and I get the hate from not having Black children.
So you adopted white children?
Yes, they're part Greek, Puerto Rican, and Cherokee.
We'll get into that a little more in depth throughout the show as well. Christy, why should Black people care about transracial adoption?
So this is a tough one for me.
Is that because you're not Black?
I can only give my perspective,
Right.
And I didn't grow up Black. So this is a very, very hard conversation for me. I have a lot to say, but
let me say this, Christy,
from what other people say.
Christy, let me say this to you to kind of ease your feelings a little bit. When I ask why should Black people care, you have a place and a space for an opinion there because you have adopted children.
Yes.
Who are Black, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you can speak volumes on this, and you can speak volumes about why Black people should care because you are caring for Black people. So we are ready to hear what you have to say.
I know that people have very strong feelings around this, and so do I. I know from being on a platform and having Black friends, I hear everyone's voices, and that's why I chose to create that space. And that's why I think about it all day, every day, even when I sleep. What more can I do for my kids? What else can I do? Like, how can I be better? How can I do more? How can I teach others what I've learned? I'm not an expert. All I can give is, what I've experienced and what I've learned, and just keep going. I think what Kimberly said really resonated with me about there not being much education on it and having it be hard. For example, me, I think it was difficult for me to ask, my Black peers and others about hair, about this, about that. It was very intimidating. I've come a long way, let me tell you. But in the beginning, it was very intimidating, and I want to bridge that gap. I think that culturally Black people are scared that they're going to lose their identity, scared they're going to lose their culture, scared that they are going to try to form that child into their white community and they're going to lose their identity. And I think that's something that has happened time and time again. I've seen it happen, and I'm not going to do that. And that's why I'm trying to bridge that gap to help those people that just don't get it and they think that love is enough. I'm really trying to help those people. And maybe by me having that voice in that platform, they won't be as intimidated, and they may be, it may be a little bit easier to hear it from me, even though I'm not an expert. So I know that this is very very touchy thing. And I think that they just don't want them to lose their identity and like who they are as a person and be confident growing up.
What I hear you saying is loud and clear. One reason why Black people should care about transracial adoption is because we need for those people who are white that adopt Black people to feel more free to be able to ask Black people questions when it comes to raising Black children. So that's a very, very important reasoning behind why we should care, because I never would have even thought that it's intimidating to go to a Black person to say, hey, you know, do I use grease in her hair? How do I twist it? I wouldn't even think that it was intimidating, but I'm not white and I don't have Black adopted children, so I wouldn't know that experience, but you have that experience, Christy. So it's interesting to hear you say that, because it's important for Black people to know that because this transracial adoptions happen, we have to be open to assisting when it comes to those identity issues that the Black children may or may not have. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about that, Rebecca, when we come back. We're going to take a quick break and come right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. To the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Tonight, the business of being Black is transracial adoption. Woo! Hot topic, baby, hot topic. Let's go to the soulmates real quick and get into it. Let's see, Incog, how are you tonight? It's about to be a different strokes kind of evening tonight, Incog says. Kay in the life of says, hey, Kim, hey, Christy. Rashida Grove on YouTube says, Kim, you look good, girl. I'm so excited for you. And then one of our soulmates says, child, I see more gay couples adopting or getting approved over Black heterosexual couples. Well, that's a whole nother show, I do believe, possibly tonight. Let's just get into this part and we'll see if we can do a part 2 and get into that part. But Rebecca, before we left off, we were talking to Christy, and the question that I ask every night to each of my panelists on a show is, why should Black people care? And the question was, why should Black people care about transracial adoption? And Christy said, look, I'm not Black. So this is a very sensitive, question for me to answer. But she answered it very eloquently. She said that a lot of people don't like Black people being adopted by white people because they're afraid that Black children would lose their identity. Your parents were white and you were adopted at birth. Mm-hmm. Right, Rebecca? So correct, yes. You're obviously an adult now. Do you feel like you lost your identity as a Black person growing up in that white household?
Yes, absolutely. It really was not until college that I even had an inkling and an idea what being Black was, or that was even a concept for me. I grew up in Olympia, Washington, which is very white. And when I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, it was even whiter than it was now. And that's why I go by the blog name Only Black Girl, because I literally grew up the only Black girl in town, and we were homeschooled. So I didn't get to go to any schools where there were Black people around me. And even if I did, there ain't no Black people to be around anyway. So it really wasn't until like high school that I even met other Black people outside of my family. Mm-hmm. And then when I got there, to around other Black people was like, I don't, what is this? I don't understand anything. And then I was hit with like the culture shock, and then not understanding a lot of like Black culture tradition.
What was the first? I'm curious to know, and I'm hoping you can remember a specific instance, but what was one of the culture shocks that you experienced specifically?
A lot of it, I want to say, because my first experience with other Black people was in church. So it was a lot of just the feeling of community. I think like for me now, that's so regular for like Black people, we just have like this, you can go around Black people you have never met. And it's just like, it feels like you're around family. Mm-hmm. And I always noticed that when I would go to church and all the Black people there who knew each other, like, yeah, we would mingle around with all the other white people and, say our hellos and whatever. But it was like, when the Black people came together, it was just something I had never experienced before. And I was like, wow, like, where has this been my entire life? And like, things that I'd always been interested in, like music and films that I'd always wanted to see that I wasn't allowed to watch in my family. I was like, oh my God, these are like things that like are normal within Black culture. And it was like
when you say movies, do you mean like Boys in the Hood, Friday, you didn't get a chance to watch?
Yeah, literally everything. Because my family, not only being white, but also very Christian, it was very like, we don't do anything secular in the house. So it was
you didn't even know to do the electric slide to Before I Let Go by Maze.
I couldn't even tell you what the electric slide was. None of that. No, absolutely not.
I want to go all the way back with Rebecca's story, because I talked about Black families being framed as a group of people who aren't interested in adopting. And the reason for transracial adoption was because children like Rebecca would grow up. They had two options. They could grow up in foster care, or they could be adopted by white people. I ran, in addition to being president of NABSW, I ran an adoption agency. I started a Black adoption agency here in Atlanta, ran it for 18 years. The families that we were working with, at least on an average, 100 families a month at some part in the adoption process, wanted you, Rebecca. They would kill for you. But the children that were presented to them were typically school-age children, meaning 6 to 17. Mm-hmm. They were in sibling groups of 3 or more children. They had supposedly special needs. And the families were coming to us interested in a child from 0 to, and they would have an upper number. They would get very upset when we would go to adoption events and they would see white people with younger children and infants, and they're Black. And they're saying, how did they get them? We would have taken those children. We were told they didn't exist. So not only were the children available for Black families to adopt, they were not presented as available to Black families, because in many instances, they had already been matched, quote unquote, with white families who were interested in a younger, healthier child. And the question is, why don't white families adopt white kids? Because in foster care, there are more white kids who are waiting than there are Black kids, although disproportionately, there are more Black kids in care. So, this is like a smokescreen here when we talk about the fact that if these children weren't adopted by white people, they would grow up in foster care. This, again, it's structural and institutional racism.
Christy, I want to ask, why did you adopt Black children?
I adopted all 5 of my children from foster care. I did not seek them out. I did not handpick them. I pick up the call. There's a child in need. I've had 36 children. 5 of them happen to stay. 3 of them happen to be Black. I will say that adopting a child of a different ethnicity is a very, very unique journey, and there needs to be a lot of preparation. I get really sad when I hear Rebecca talking about her experience, because it seems so like common sense to me. Like, you should do your homework, you should do your research, you should be prepared for the lifetime commitment of constant education and being open and learning and standing up, confronting racism. It makes me really sad. So first of all, I want to say I'm sorry that you grew up like that, because that is exactly what I'm trying not to do. It makes me really sad, because I just feel like at this point of age,
I want to ask Rebecca now, though. Rebecca, do you regret growing up with a lost Black identity, or
I really
are you happy about it?
It's hard for me to answer that. People ask me that all the time, but it's because I have no other reality to compare it to. I don't know how to answer that question. I can't tell you what it would have been like for me to grow up in a Black family, because regardless of where I grow up, I'm still adopted. And I think people have this idea that even if you're adopted into a same race family, then everything's just going to be peachy. But adoption, and that's one of the reasons why I do what I do with my adoption work, is traumatic, period. Doesn't matter the situation. It's just transracial is an added trauma layer on there. So it's hard for me to answer that question of like, would I have been happier in another family, or would I I don't know, because I don't have any other experience this is the life that I had.
Well, I guess what my question is, did you grow up happy? Did you miss out on anything? outside
looking
of
as
the
an
Black
adult,
culture?
yes. As an adult looking back, yes, I did. When I was growing up, no, I did not consciously that I knew of. I knew there were things that weren't right, because being the only Black person, it's kind of hard to just ignore the fact that you're the only person that looks like you around. So I knew from a very, very young age that I was different, but I didn't have the vocabulary or the education to kind of put words to what I was experiencing, which was racism.
Understood. Yeah, understood.
So yeah, looking back now, I can see where there were a lot of things that were messed up and my parents should have done differently. And I've talked to them about even today. And those are things that we talk about now. So looking back, I can go back and see that, yeah, this was not a healthy situation at all, period. But growing up, I was a happy kid.
Do they understand now?
Yes,
or is it still a little
for the most part. My mom is really good about it. She's very good at kind of admitting that she was wrong and she made mistakes, and she's doing a lot to learn. My dad is a little bit more stubborn. He's taken more the route of like, but not all white people are bad. And it's like, okay, but like, that's not what we're talking about here. Like, you have 3 Black children. You have to acknowledge at some point that you have Black kids, and we're Black, and we're not going to stop talking about the fact that we're Black. Like, so with him, it's been a little bit more tough, but my mom has been a lot more understanding, and she and I have conversations about race and my life growing up, and now there's grandkids.
So before I move on to Kimberly, I want to ask you one question, and I want a yes or no. Are you for or against transracial adoption, being that you yourself were adopted by white people?
I would say against, if I had to choose yes or no.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Kimberly, I know a lot of Black folk mad at you. I know you can't get a break, sis. You can't get a break, sis. All these Black folk, all these Black kids that need to be adopted, and you go and grab white children.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
Why on earth would you do that?
Because just like how Christy said, you don't choose. You can put down, in almost like how Tony said, you put your age range. And my age range was, at first it was 0 to 3. But me being a single woman, I have to put them in daycare. So I said 6 weeks to 3 years old so they can fit in daycare. I didn't care what the race was. I didn't care what color they were. I was foolish in the beginning to say what gender I wanted. And I only wanted girls. And that was just me being a single woman. I figured I didn't know how to raise a boy, because a lot of people say a boy needs his dad. He needs his dad. So I said, I only want girls. I don't care what color they are. I just need them 6 weeks to 3 years old. And I started getting calls for boys. And I've had 7 children altogether. 5 of them were Black and 2 were the white kids that I adopted. The 5 children were reunified. And I had one little boy, he was Black, and I had him for over a year, and I died when he left. And I took a whole year off of being a foster parent because I thought I was going to adopt him, but his mom got her life back together when they start throwing the word adoption around. At first, she didn't want to get her life together. She treated us like the babysitter. And then when the social worker said, you can't do this, Kimberly's going to adopt this little boy. Then she said, no, I'm get my life together. She got her life together and she got him back. And then I took a whole year off of doing foster care because it hurt bad. And then it was like, God said, I need you again. And I kid you not, 7 days after that happened, Lizzie showed up in my life. And then I adopted her. And then I got a call saying, well, Lizzie has a brother that we need you. And I was like, God, I thought a family member took him. And I was like, no, that family member can't have him anymore. We need you. And I really got to hate when my son showed up because my son looks white. My daughter can play off looking mixed. A lot of people thought she was mixed. But when my son showed up, that's when the hate rolled in because he looks completely white. And a lot of people say, well, there's a lot of Black children in care. You should have taken those Black kids. You just want to be white. But it's like, I can't want to be white. Like, I feel like adopting white children would make me realize I'm Black more, because every day I get the looks. Every day on YouTube, I'm called every word under the sun. So it's like, that's a reminder every day that you're Black, because I don't know how to explain it, but I didn't pick those two kids. DCF picked them. And it's funny because on their paperwork, they're not listed as white. They're listed as minorities. And it's weird. It says
Wow.
their age and it says their gender and it said minority. And then when I said minority, the state called them Puerto Rican. So that's what I thought they were. But they're mixed. They're Puerto Rican, Greek, and Cherokee. But the world sees them as white, but the state claimed them as minorities. And I guess that's why I got them. So I don't know.
Tony, can you explain that, how the state listed them as a minority?
Well, we can talk about racism again, because the children that I placed, the agency that I ran, placed children from foster care. Before that, I worked with a lot of agencies, public and private, across the country who were looking for families for Black children. And they would categorize them really in any way. I mean, it wasn't that important. In fact, when I first got started in my career in my 20s, there were photo listing books of children who were available. And underneath them, they would have a B, W, and a BW. And I asked, what was a BW? And they explained to me that those were children who had a Black and a white parent. What does that mean for the child? If you're looking at, if you're making a determination but based on what they look like, most of the workers, social workers in child welfare are not people of color. And so if they're looking at them and maybe not looking at the backgrounds, maybe not reading it, maybe somebody entered something incorrectly along the way. There's so many things that happen that are just not fair in terms of meeting the needs of children who come into the system, into foster care. So they become whatever is written on paper. And just like Kimberly said, when you look at the paper, probably they were something different along the way. When you looked at their entire history in the child welfare system, they may have been Puerto Rican at one point because someone said either by name or by parent or by neighborhood or whatever, they assigned them something. So, I mean, that's something else that really bothers me about this whole system is that children are commodities. And the extent to which, you know, one of the things too is how these children get into care. I was happy to hear that the Black sibling group was reunited, because most of the children who come into care could be reunited, but the system works to separate children in terms of the support that's given for that family. The funds, they're called 4E funds, do not kick in until a child is removed. The lesser funds available to an agency are 4B funds, and that's for family preservation. So if you look at the carrot and the stick, the agencies have more money to remove children than they have to provide services in home so the children can stay at home. And for Black children, the majority of them come into care for what is called neglect, 75%, neglect, 15% abuse. Neglect, what does that look like? It looks like poverty. So for a poor family who cannot provide health care or the housing or educational services or medical care, then the family is abused because you can't provide these things. The services are not in your community. You don't have the right education. You don't live in the right neighborhood. You don't talk the right way. So we're going to remove your children into foster care to protect them. And then there's a certain period of time, like Kimberly's, one of Kimberly's,
we got to go to break real quick, Tony. We're going to go to break and we'll finish that thought when we return on the Tammi Mac Late Show.
Okay.
Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Tonight, the business of being Black are transracial adoptions. Please welcome the former national president of the National Association of Black Social Workers, Tony Oliver. The creator of the YouTube channel Holding It Down, Kimberly Holden. Transracial adoptee and advocate Rebecca Hudson is here. An adoption YouTuber and the mother of 5 adopted children, Christy Gior, is here as well. Thank you, ladies, for being here to talk about this oh so sensitive subject. I'm going to go to our soulmates and see what we got here. Deborah says, for me, people are people, all humans. Bruce, our soulmate, says, thank you, ladies, for all you do for these children. Jane Rose, hi, Jane, says, I am learning so much. It's funny, Jane, I just told them that I was learning so much because I did not know that you don't get to pick who you want to adopt. I kind of thought they gave you like a plethora of choices and you said, yeah, I'll take this one. That's what I thought adoption was. Jackie says, yes, these ladies are amazing. God bless you. And then Jacqueline, our soulmate, says, I follow Christy and Kim. They are amazing mothers. So everybody's speaking, attesting to your motherhood. And what's interesting about both of you ladies is that Christy, you've adopted Black children, and Kimberly, you've adopted white children. And Rebecca, you're a part of a system who you were raised by white parents.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for me, I want Toni to finish her thought that we were talking about before we left for the break.
Well, just let me say that the children who come into foster care are coming because they have been removed from their birth families. And so we want to believe that those families have done something wrong. And in many instances, they have not done anything wrong. They, in fact, as a family system, have been abused. But their children get locked into a system and oftentimes cannot get out. And then I was saying to Kimberly, I was happy that that mother saw the light and decided that you weren't the babysitter and that if she wanted to be the mother, she had to get her act together. There are a number of families who do everything to get their act together, and neither they nor their kin, nor the people that they know who are their support system have a chance in the courts to be able to take in the children, and the children's rights are terminated anyway, and they may or may not be adopted. So, you know, it's not as cut and dried as it seems. It's not children who really need adoption. And yes, there are some who really need adoption. But I'll tell you, the majority of them need the support services within their birth families to be able to stay in the birth families. And whenever I do workshops around adoption, invariably there will be a grandmother or an aunt or an uncle or a sister who will come up to me and ask me, what can they do to get their relative's child out of the system? My first question is whether or not their parental rights have been terminated. And in most instances, they have. And if that's the case, they've lost the children. If the parental rights have not been terminated, in most cases, they have not been given the correct information about what kinds of supports they need, and they have not been included in terms of the case plan to be considered as a permanent option for those children.
One of the members of the racist group, the Proud Boys, John Kinsman, is married to a Black woman and is a father to Black children. He isn't an adoptive parent, but it brings up the question, what are your thoughts about the potential of white parents having racial prejudice towards their Black children? I don't even understand this. I don't even understand how, like, I give up. I just give up on this one. I don't understand how you can be prejudiced and marry a Black woman. I don't know how that happens. I'm lost.
The same way that slave owners raped their slaves. It's a power thing. It has absolutely nothing to do with love or lust or anything like that. And in adoption, it happens all the time, which is one of the reasons I'm very, very vocal about the adoptee experience. There are a lot of white families that hate Black people or any person of color that still adopt them. And I mean, just what was it, 2 years ago, there was the Hart family that murdered all 5 of their Black children. They're 2 white women, actually from Seattle, near where I'm from, and they murdered all 5 of their Black children. And it's just like, people do it all the time. It's not even something that I can't believe anymore, because it's so normal for white people who hate us to also bring us into their lives so that they can't abuse us. And that's why the adoption industry, like Toni has said, is just absolute garbage. It's trash. It's terrible. It needs to be torn apart from the inside out and just completely rebuilt, because it was built on racism. It was built to abuse Black people. I mean, it was literally built off of Black market adoption. So it's like, there's no possible way that we can have a just system when it was literally built based on stealing Black children and selling them to white people. So it's yeah, it's very normal, and people have just done a great job at putting this beautiful, like, adoption is great, and we have this great campaign around it where everything is just bubbles and rainbows. And so we're not gonna, don't look too close at the things going on behind the scenes, and don't ask any adoptees, because they'll tell you what's really going on. So that's why they always ask the white parents, because they'll tell you everything is great.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's like, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, huh?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Tony, you have provided child welfare training in over 40 United States and Europe. Have you provided that same training for white parents who are considering transracial adoption?
Not so much that are considering it, but I have provided training to a number of white families who have already adopted transracially. And what they've said to me has been very revealing. I am very, very pleased that many of them can say, if I knew then what I know now, I would have reconsidered, because they looked at the world differently. They thought that they were taking in children and that color or race did not matter. And so it would just be a matter of bringing them into their home. And somebody said, look, love is enough. And then the children get into the family and they see the things that children are getting messages about who they are as a Black person when they're very young. There are statements that are being made about who can play with them, or can they, wash off the color, or, very things that are hurtful to children, regardless of age. And then when it comes to, sometimes they don't ask questions. So they figure, I can take care of this child. And I was appalled at some conferences that I would go to that were pretty full of white transracial adoptive parents who were walking around with children that they seemed to love, and I wouldn't take that away from them, but who they couldn't care for their hair or skin. So their skin was ashy, their hair was overwashed and dry and matted. And they said that they're beautiful. And these children are looking in the mirror saying, this isn't what beauty looks like to me. I don't look like you. Let me see what it is that I can do that will make me more acceptable.
Oh, on that note, Tony, I want to move to Christy on that. You have children who are white in your home, Christy, and you have children who are Black in your home.
Yes.
I'm interested in knowing how beauty plays a part in your home.
I believe all my children are beautiful.
Well, I understand you believe that. I get it. But how do the kids look at it? Do your Black kids look at your white kids and say, why don't I look like you? Or do they even look at you and say, why don't I look like you? Or do your white kids feel some kind of way about the Black kids? How do you handle that racial divide? Because look, I'm a Black woman, and Black women innately have a feeling of inferiority because we don't have straight hair. We can't get our hair wet. We don't look this certain way that America has decided is beauty. And so how does that play in your household when you have Black children who every day are looking at their siblings that have this level of societal beauty and they don't?
I think that us living in a diverse area, it's not as big as a problem as people may think. I made it my priority to make sure that I didn't just adopt one Black child. There was two or three of them. I think that is a huge thing, not having them be alone. I kept siblings together, and I actually have twins. And it's not a question of, why don't I look like you, mommy? Or why don't I have straight hair like my sister? Because I'm very open and honest with my children, which I believe is the number one thing when raising adoptive children. So they know why. They know that they have a tummy mommy that looks like them. They know that, we adopted them. I'm very open with them. But yeah, there has been times when one of my daughters specifically, sometimes when we're spending an hour and a half on her hair, she'll say, oh, I wish I had, it happened once, but a mother will never forget this. I wish I had straighter hair like you so it wouldn't take me so long so I can go play outside quicker. And that kind of just kills you a little bit inside. But I knew it was happening. But I just said, baby girl, I have to curl my hair or like put something in it and lay in it overnight to get beautiful curls like you. And she smiled and we moved on. So that's just kind of how we deal with things. We all are beautiful. They all are beautiful in their own way. And I reinforce that. I think it's my job as an adoptive mother of Black daughters, especially in this circumstance regarding hair, because I know there's this big thing around hair. It's part of, their confidence and how the world perceives them. I get it. And that's why I actually started teaching other foster parents and adoptive parents on what I've learned about hair care. And I make it my job to make sure their hair is always on point. And I let them pick their styles. I'm not going to put whatever I want to put in their hair. They get to pick. We go through Pinterest. We go through Google. You get to pick what you want. If mommy can't do it, we're going to get someone to come to the house, or we're going to go to the Black salon where you can get someone to professionally do it. Because I can't do cornrows. I can do twists all day and all that. I can care for their hair, but there's some things that I know that I can't do. So I always make sure that I outsource and find people that can do that and fill that.
Look, girl, I can't do cornrows either. So you ain't got to feel bad about that. I got to
No, I don't. I don't have time for that. I got enough on my plate.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Thank you so much for being in the chat. Robert, our soulmate, says, if you're homeschooled in a right-wing conservative Christian household, you're going to feel like you missed out on a lot growing up, regardless of the race of your parents. Okay, Rebecca, you can probably speak to that because you said that your household was very, a super duper Christian household. Mm-hmm. And so what Robert is saying is maybe the fact that your parents were white has nothing to do with you kind of missing out on Black experiences.
It definitely does.
Right.
It does. I mean, how can it not? I don't have any frame of what Blackness would. I didn't even know that race was a thing because we weren't allowed to discuss it. It wasn't, my parents were very much like most white people are, they're very colorblind, and we just love all of our kids. We see no color. We just love our kids, which is cute in theory, but in reality, I and my other 3 adoptive Black siblings are still dealing with racism every single day. And all that does to us is it just means that we learn very quickly that we don't have a supportive household to go back to discuss these things and to even like say, hey, I experienced this really weird thing and I don't know what's going on, but I feel attacked and I feel unsafe and like, I don't know what to do with all this information because they're white. They don't know what we're talking about. They don't know how to process those things. And I mean, all of the Black stereotypes or whatever you would call them aside, like the music and all that aside, that has nothing to do with it. But me as a person, number one, being adopted, you don't know. And my adoption being closed, which means I have no access to my family history.
That part I can't really stand. I don't, Tony, please explain that. Why would an adoption be closed and you not be able to know where you come from? That is such a huge part of a person's life.
Okay, so let me connect the dots. Adoption services began as a service for infertile white couples who were seeking healthy white infants. And even to the extent that the mother would go away for the last 6 months before the child was born so that she could come back with a baby. And the baby that she was going to come back with had been matched by the agency. So if it was a tall family, they were looking for a birth family that was tall. If it was a family who was blonde, they were looking for a birth family who was blonde, and on and on. So never should anyone ever think that this child was not a biological child of this adoptive family. Mm-hmm. So it continued to move on and on and on and on until after World War II, at the point that Black children were seen as maybe being eligible for foster care, but definitely not adoption. So the adoption industry continues, for the most part, looking at matching children to families, and will in many instances encourage that the birth family, not just the birth parents, but the birth family, when the rights are terminated, it is so that none of that birth family stuff would ever enter into the minds or discussions of that adoptive parent.
It's such a harsh way to treat a child.
It's a
Kimberly,
very harsh way to treat a child, but more
Kimberly, girl, you single?
Yes. Yeah.
I just look, I don't know how mothers do it, period. But I heard you say you had 5 adoptive children at one point, and you're single.
All at the same time.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. My first placement were 2 little Black girls. I had them for 21 hours, and then their grandmother stepped up. And then after that, I had 2 twin babies straight out the hospital. I had them for a little bit over a month, and then their mom got them back. And then I had a little boy for over a year, and then his mom got him back. And then my daughter came, I adopted her, and then my son came and I adopted him.
I want to ask you the same question I asked Christy about how beauty plays a role in your household when it comes to you being Black, but your children not looking like their mother. How do they see that? Do they speak on that? How is that handled?
Well, like Christy said, you have to be honest with them. And I was honest with them from the very beginning. Like Christy said, they know that they have a tummy mommy, but for the first time, my daughter last week actually spoke the words, my birth mother. And she never said that before. She would always just call her by her name, but she knew that she didn't come from me. And I would always say, you're beautiful, your hair is nice, but she says she wants curly hair. So I braided her hair one time and it was curly, and she was going like this, Mommy, I look like you now, like this. My son, he always says, Mommy, you are so beautiful. When I grow up, I'm gonna marry me a brown girl with a puff. He says that. But now he's obsessed with Ariel. So he says he's gonna marry a girl with red hair. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened to the brown girl with the puff? He said, well, she could live down the street. I said, wait, what? And then he said, well, I'm not quite sure yet. I don't know if I'm gonna marry her or her. I was like, boy, but he always says that we're beautiful.
Let's take a quick break and come right back, because I want to ask you how you deal with racism on the other spectrum when it comes to your children. We're going to take a quick break, come right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show. Well, I don't get to ask Kimberly about racism in her household and how she addresses it because we've run out of time. But I do want to ask, you have millions of views on your YouTube channel, Holding It Down. Tell us how we can find you.
You can find me on YouTube at Holding It Down, or on Instagram at Holding It Down.
And that's HOLDEN, as in Kimberly Holden, Holding It Down. Got it. Christy, tell us about your adoption content on your YouTube page. How can we find it?
It's the same as my name here, Christy Gior, both on YouTube and Instagram. And it's basically, I'm trying to create a space where we can share vlogs and family things and kind of just like show our love for each other, that love does have no boundaries and we can be a healthy family and a happy family, even though we all are multicultural. And I do share tips on foster care and adoption, as well as hair care, just trying to support our community.
Rebecca, only Black girl. It reminds me a little bit of Awkward Black Girl.
Yes.
Only Black girl. You like, if only I can get some of them HBO deals.
Right. One day.
Yes, I believe that. Only Black girl. Where do we find it? How do we get it?
You can find me on Only Black Girl pretty much across all platforms. I'm mainly a blogger, so onlyblackgirl.com. I also have a YouTube, Instagram, all the social medias. You can find me. Yeah, I do a lot of yelling at white people. So if that's your thing, you can come find me.
I think I'll tune in.
Super positive.
Just to live vicariously through you. Are you getting that frustration out from childhood? I do a lot of yelling at white folks.
You know, white people just being foolish every day. So
every day, yes, every day. Tony, you're retired as a child welfare administrator, but I can imagine you completely leaving away from that platform as much as passionately as you speak about it. So, how do we help you, or what is it that you are now doing to help in that particular forum?
Well, I'm involved in quite a bit. I work with still public and private agencies that are looking to improve their services to Black families and children. And I'm still active with the National Association of Black Social Workers, and we have a presence on Facebook and Twitter and a website, nabsw.org.
Well, thank you so much, ladies, for tuning in. Thank you, soulmates, for tuning in. Thank you, ladies, for being here to tell us your stories and to give us expertise behind transracial adoption. This concludes the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Until tomorrow, everybody, it's a blessing to be in your box. Bye, y'all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.